Welcome to another edition of the News Review. In this edition, the ruling Scottish National Party has elected Health Minister Humza Yousaf to be the country's next leader. He has vowed to deliver Scottish independence from the United Kingdom.
Leadership elections, by their very nature, can be bruising. However, in the SNP, we are a family. Over the last 5 weeks, we may have been competitors or supporters of different candidates. We are no longer Team Humza or Team Ash or Team Kate. We are one team, and we will be the team. We will be the generation that delivers independence for Scotland. Where there are divisions to heal, we must do so.
Yousaf also promised to win over those who were opposed to a split from the United Kingdom. He said that he would reunite Scotland with the European Union. Yousaf won 52% of the party's member votes in the second round to succeed Nicola Sturgeon, who resigned unexpectedly last month. The 37-year-old is the first Muslim to lead a major UK party. He was born in Glasgow with a father from Pakistan and a mother from Kenya. He is set to be confirmed as Scotland's next First Minister in a nominal vote at the Parliament on Tuesday. The election campaign was marked by bitter personal attacks, exposing deep divisions in the SNP. For more on that, we're joined by Amina Taylor, our correspondent who's joining us live from London, and also Tony Gosling, an investigative journalist who's joining us live from Bristol. Let's begin with our very own Amina Taylor, our correspondent from London. Amina, tell us more. First of all, it seems to be quite significant to have a Muslim leading this party as the first time.
Well, it is and it isn't, if I'm going to be brutally honest with you, because Humza Yousaf, of the three candidates for the SNP leadership contest here, was actually the most experienced just in terms of frontline politics. There were a couple of issues where his faith actually became front and center, but apart from that, I believe it was more his closeness to Nicola Sturgeon, the first minister who stepped down, that actually exposed a few more question marks. I've always found, surprisingly enough, Scottish politics to be a little bit more egalitarian, but I do know now that he is in the driving seat, now that he is the man who's been given that torch to try and drive through Scottish independence, his ethnicity, his religion, aspects of his faith, his personal life, those elements will come to the fore with a little bit more, shall we say, investigative introspection. So it's gonna come up. You're going to hear perhaps folks who didn't have an interest in Scottish politics so much having something to say about the new First Minister. I believe it's a formality. He will be confirmed tomorrow. It will expose some of the racism. It will expose some of the Islamophobia, but I don't think that was front and center of Humza Yousaf's campaign here.
Okay, so Mr. Gosling, let's bring you in and see what this campaign promise means exactly. A generation, in his own words, that will deliver Scottish independence. How likely is that to happen?
Well, it's not going to happen, and I can say that categorically. I mean, the Scottish National Party, the SNP, have got a series of serious problems. I mean, for example, having a Muslim leader is not, it's not a Muslim country. And so this doesn't really bode well for it. It probably means that the SNP are going to lose more votes. So in the leadership election, he was, the press was saying he was going to win. And of course, a lot of the polls were saying he was going to win, largely because he was a loyal devotee to the party, and the party were pushing him. But the problem is, although he was a health leader right the way through the pandemic, what we had from him was virtually nothing. All the health announcements were made by Nicola Sturgeon, so he was a kind of behind the scenes character. And the Scottish National Party have got an even bigger problem, and that is, if you look at the polls, including ones which happened straight after the vote for Brexit back in 2016, around about 45% of the Scots want to remain with the UK, and about 35% want to leave the UK. So the SNP is trying to push independence, which the Scottish people don't actually want. So, again, what you're going to get is you're going to get other parties like the Greens starting to succeed. The SNP are stuck in a rut, and they're not learning the lessons of Sturgeon. I mean, the reason she went, and by the way, it wasn't a surprise, because the SNP have been falling so badly behind in the polls, losing seats, losing control of the Holyrood Parliament, and so something had to change. Her going was completely expected. What is the whole gender recognition legislation that Sturgeon and Humza Yousaf and actually one of the other candidates, Kate Forbes, was pushing as hard as they could. Now, this is also very unpopular amongst the Scottish people. So what we've got is we've got a political class in Scotland, in the SNP particularly, who are just not listening to the voters. And so that's why they're not going to succeed. And they're certainly not going to succeed in independence, unless, of course, Westminster really makes a mess of things, in which case the Scots, because the Scots don't want to go back to being controlled by Brussels. They'd much rather be controlled by Westminster or Edinburgh.
Interject a little bit here, because though I agree in some sweeping points with what Mr. Gosling has said, it's actually a little bit more nuanced than that. I do believe the polls, depending on which one you read at which time, give the push for independence a little bit more vigor than just 35%. There's some undivided and perhaps undecided. Yeah. I also believe that we've seen Westminster fumble the ball here. One of perhaps the things that is stopping the SNP in terms of its push for independence, and that being more of a clamour, is actually some of the issues that are affecting us kind of south of the border here, which is the cost of living crisis. In one of these issues, when you're trying to put food on the table, you don't care much who is going to help, whether it's Holyrood or whether it's going to be Westminster. And I think better economic circumstances, perhaps Rishi Sunak really showing his hand when it comes to Scottish independence, and, really Boris Johnson was so loath that side of the border that he was giving some easy goals here. It's going to be a little bit more complex, but the issue is not as cut and dry as that. And I think if the statistics around, you mentioned there, the Brexit results in 2016, I was in Glasgow and Edinburgh when Scotland voted to stay inside the European Union. And some argued that the referendum was lost because there was the cry of, if you leave London, if you leave Britain, you will also leave the European Union, and there's no coming back. So there are a lot more issues at stake here. I don't know if Scotland is going to be as concerned about Humza Yousaf's ethnicity and faith as I think, but hey, I've been wrong before, unfortunately. It can surprise you how sometimes petty and racist and Islamophobic people can be when push comes to shove, unfortunately.
Well, I don't think it's petty racism. I think it's just that you need to have a leader that can capture the hearts and minds. And if it's a different faith, that's a much more difficult job to do. He's got a hell of a hill to climb to do that. We've also had all this problem, as I'm sure you know, Amina, in the SNP itself, where you've got a chief executive who's the husband of the party leader. This is extremely unhealthy with Nicola Sturgeon's husband. Extremely unhealthy to have. It's almost become like a kind of family business. And what they've been doing with the membership scandal over the last couple of months is far worse, because they've lost 25% in the last year or so of their membership. And yet they've been lying about it. They've been saying, no, we haven't, no. And finally, the figures have just come out that they have been lying about it. So the SNP are really tying themselves in knots. And they don't really, I think, when they're down at Westminster, the leadership in Westminster, they are far too dour. Actually, Scottish people are very humorous. They have a wry sense of humour. We get none of that from the SNP. All we seem to get is, kind of depressing, people have, they call it dour in Scotland, where what they're doing is they're taking a humourless, judgmental attitude, and this is not ordinary Scottish people's way. So I think there's every opportunity for other parties to come through because of the mistake the SNP have made.
But I also do know that Humza Yousaf is one of the few leaders that I've had the opportunity to meet with and interview over the years. And he's a charming, persuasive fella. I do hope a little bit of that can rub off in terms of his appearances. I hope too much won't be made on, where he prays and what God he prays to. And like Rishi Sunak south of the border, to give him an opportunity to show that he leads a broad church and can actually, as he says in his words today, after landing the job, that he'll govern for all of Scotland. Let's see what that looks like.
Well, the problem is, though, of course, that we've got really in the West, finance capitalism is behind all of the people that stand in politics nowadays. And very few of the candidates ever get even a chance to be in the limelight and stand an opportunity of being elected if they're not beholden to the finance capitalists. I'm afraid the SNP candidates are all, they seem to be much more concerned about bringing investment from the United States into Scotland than they do with actually dealing with the basic social issues like putting food on the table.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, and our very own Amina Taylor. That was a great debate. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and views with us on this edition of the News Review. And I guess time will tell, so we're going to have to just wait and see how things will develop. Thank you very much to both of you. And thanks to all of you viewers for watching this edition.